UFC 308 Topuria vs. Holloway is this week. I'm going to give you a full card prediction breakdown of all 14 fights on this card, starting with the main event. I'm going to change things up for this card. For the couple people that have noticed, I've taken a little break, and it was mostly because it felt like I was getting a ton of my main event predictions right. Like during certain cards, I'm like, wow, I'm doing like horrible. Like the record might not be great on all 12 to 15 fights or whatever, but I always felt like I got the main event correct, and that was what I needed because that's a big fight on the card. However, recently I have not been getting a good main event pick. So what I did was I cleaned out the shed, no lights, no nothing. Got a bucket for peeing and pooping, and went straight Yuri in there. 72 hours, no food, no water, and just talked to the spirits to tell me who the hell was going to win this fight, and they kept on whispering in my ear, Topuria, Topuria, Topuria. They didn't tell me how, because I'm not quite sure how the hell Topuria. I feel like it could go two different ways in this fight, but they kept saying Topuria. So I'm gonna go with Topuria in this fight, and I'll tell you why. I think Max Holloway will struggle with another smaller fighter. Ilia Topuria is very similar in height. I think he's listed as 1 more inch taller than Volkanovski. I think that's probably kind of true if you see the face-off or whatever. Just depending on what shoes they're wearing, they're pretty similar in height. I think Max Holloway will struggle with the height a little bit more here. A taller fighter and Max, 5'11", 6 foot, is going to have to crouch a little bit more to land a little bit more straight shots than you normally would on like a Gaethje, who's also like a 5'10", 5'11". It's a little bit different because you got to angle your shots a specific way. And coming into this fight, Max Holloway bulked up pretty well to lightweight. That was his goal going into that Gaethje fight. After the Dustin Poirier fight, he felt like he was a little bit too small. He wanted to bulk up for the Gaethje fight, and he ended up getting the finish. So I guess it did work, but he is having to cut back down to 145. And if you've seen on his Instagram, that weight cut is looking rough, I will say. And I do think that chin will have a chance to be broken in this fight. I'm not saying that Ilia Topuria will flatline Max Holloway or KO him brutally. There's a very big chance because Ilia Topuria's power is pretty good, I will say. He just came off of a pretty brutal KO victory over Alexander Volkanovski, who also did seem to have his chin. I mean, Volkanovski has always seemed to be chinny, but he put him out. But for this fight, I think for Ilia Topuria, you're seeing two guys, or not for Ilia Topuria, but in this matchup, you'll see two guys who will be fighting in the pocket a little bit more. I think Ilia Topuria, just being the smaller guy and the guy with the most power, I think it's gonna be a little bit of a Ilia Topuria trying to be the hammer, and Max Holloway avoiding trying to be the nail in this fight. More of Ilia Topuria, I think early on, is not going to be as active. I think in the first round, he normally kind of likes to feel it out a little bit more before he starts going crazy. But his feints are pretty good because he knows how to use his power. In combinations, he's really fast as well with the power. It's not like he's Volkanovski where he's going to give you like 30 different things in one combination and step back and use his range pretty well. Like, he's going to sit in the pocket, choose his shots, mixing it like a leg kick, go to the body a little bit more here. And I think for Ilia Topuria, you want to keep Max Holloway off on his back foot, kind of keep his guard up, not let him get comfortable, not let him get in that kind of like a flow state that Max Holloway seems to get in certain points in these fights. And Ilia Topuria, I think, will want to get to the body in this fight. I think it's going to be a little bit more open there. Max Holloway wants to avoid getting knocked out, of course, but I think if he gets to the body, kind of drives Max Holloway a little bit backwards towards the fence, maybe get in the clinch a little bit more here, maybe threaten a takedown, get Max Holloway thinking about it. I think if you're Ilia Topuria, you want to go to the body of Max Holloway a little bit more, kind of even it out as this fight goes on, because I think as this fight goes on, it starts to lean Max's way, I will say. In like the 4th or 5th round, I think Max Holloway against the Ilia Topuria, who might be a little bit slower with some of his punches. I mean, he's still fast, like we saw in the Emmett fight. Like, he was still unloading some nice combinations on Emmett, but he does start to slow down a little bit, and that will create some more opportunity for Max Holloway. But again, I think Max Holloway, if you're Max, keep a good range, maybe throw a lot of kicks in there to the body. Ilia Topuria is kind of open with a head kick. You saw Volk kind of sling one up pretty quick, but weirdly enough, like Topuria, it seems like his whole career, even in the UFC, I think against Jai Herbert, when he tried to go up to 155, he even got hit with the head kick there. For some reason, it slips in. I think you're Max Holloway, that's a good way of kind of keeping a decent range on Ilia Topuria, kind of throw a teeth there to keep him honest, because Ilia Topuria is just going to be fainting like crazy in that fight. You saw that against Volkanovski. He's super fast. I think I'm just going to have to go with Topuria. I think a lot of things favor him in this fight with the height, like I explained, the weight cut for Max Holloway. He's also not even 28 years of age. He's still getting better. Max Holloway is, almost 33? He is getting a little bit older, and it's kind of weird to say because you would always think, like, Max Holloway's, he's got to be older, like he's been in the UFC for so long, but he's only 33. In the prime of his career right now, but I just think that weight cut is just going to be really rough for him. I'm not saying he's going to tire out easily, because I think Max Holloway's style, he has kind of slowed it down a little bit more. Like, he's not being as reckless, I will say. But there are still those moments where you can land on him too, because he does kind of stay a little bit stationary at times. And also, Max Holloway has been sparring recently. I believe before is either the TKZ fight or the Justin Gaethje fight, he did start sparring again, and I do think that'll eventually chip away at that chin as well. I just always wonder, like, Max Holloway is one of those guys where you're like, okay, so when's the chin gonna go? Like, he takes so many shots, when's the chin gonna go? And I think there's a pretty big opportunity for Ilia Topuria to take the chin of Max Holloway in this fight. So I'm gonna go with Topuria. I think he just has so many options in this fight, and I think he's gonna be the guy that is gonna keep Max Holloway, like, kind of on edge during the fight, because you always have that power. It's the speed too, that's a big problem. He can throw a leg kick, he can take you down, he has good grappling, he's very strong, he can put you in the clinch, he can go to the body. There's just so many things that Max Holloway has to worry about, and if he wants to engage in the pocket of Ilia Topuria, he's got to make a pretty good read. And I think Ilia Topuria's boxing is very good, and I don't know, when I see something like the Volkanovski fight, and I know Volkanovski has really weird reach, I will say, let me look exactly what it is of Volkanovski's reach. 71.5, so it's 2.5 inches longer than Ilia Topuria, and that's 2.5 inches longer than Max Holloway. So he's a smaller guy, but his reach is really weird, and he's really fast in the output. Maybe, like I said, Max Holloway in the 4th or 5th round can start to get the advantage on Topuria and start to take over rounds if it does get that far, where Topuria will be slowing down and he can get a nice little read on it. But I think Ilia Topuria, just going round by round here, Ilia Topuria will take the first round a little bit off, like not go too hard on it, make his reads. You've seen that in the Emmett fight. You saw that against Volkanovski as well. Start to make his reads. And I think he's just going to beat down on Max Holloway. And I think if this fight does go to the decision, I think you'll see Max Holloway probably start to take over in the 5th round, where Ilia Topuria will slow down a little bit more. And I think we'll see a dominant, I wouldn't say dominant, I'll say one-sided 2, 3, and 4 from Ilia, with the 5th round Max Holloway kind of bringing it back a little bit more and maybe landing pretty well on Topuria. But I think Topuria will invest. I've seen so many clips of Ilia Topuria landing body shots. I just think, just looking at that last fight against Gaethje, like, Max Holloway's hands were so high up. I just see eventually, like, Topuria just landing super big to the body, maybe because he does load up at certain points. Maybe load up and send Max Holloway back to the fence, and as Max Holloway's like circling around, maybe land something to the body. I just think there's a lot of options for Ilia Topuria, and I just don't see it with Max Holloway. So I'm going to go with Ilia Topuria. I don't know if he can get the finish. That's my true worry here. I can see him KOing Max, and it could be brutal. Like, Max Holloway just came off of his first ever knockdown. I guess it wasn't official, but he came off of his first ever knockdown. Even, of course, Justin Gaethje was tearing up that leg. He eventually got away from it. Maybe Ilia Topuria can land some decent leg kicks, but I don't know, man. This could be the fight where we see Max Holloway get brutally knocked down and finished on the ground. I don't think he'll get flatlined, but this could be the fight where his chin goes. So it's going to be very interesting. Max Holloway does, of course, have a really good chance at winning this. The odds are pretty close. I don't think they're this far away on the betting lines. I haven't checked what the official sites are saying, but I'm going to go with Ilia Topuria. I like him in this fight. I think he has a lot of advantages coming into it. Let's move on to the co-main event. We have Robert Whittaker versus Khamzat Chimaev. This card could go very wrong for me. I will say. I'm going to go with Khamzat Chimaev. Khamzat Chimaev, when was his last fight? About a year ago against Kamaru Usman, who came in on short notice, and that fight was pretty close, like extremely close. I think the only thing that saved Khamzat was like a 10-8 round in like the first round or something like that. where do I want to start here? Khamzat Chimaev, I believe, did change up. I don't know if he went to a different camp or if he changed up his style in his camp, or not like actual like fighting style, but changed like his productivity in his training camp, where he's not overtraining himself. And I think that's going to be a pretty big factor in this fight. I don't think he actually changed training camps. I could be wrong there, but we could see a Chimaev that's not gassing out super early into the fights. Like, he doesn't have 2 good minutes in him. We could see a Chimaev who, of course, makes the fight, because the last fight he got really sick from because he was overtraining. And I think him just being a little bit smarter in this fight, he said he's learning from pretty good coaches as well. I think he's going to have a smarter game plan. I don't think he's going to gas as much. I think he's going to catch some people by surprise is what my prediction is going to be for this fight. But getting into the outcome of this fight, I think he has a potential of KOing Robert Whittaker. Robert Whittaker, although he did get KO'd against Dricus, Dricus was able to take him down with the headlock, which was pretty insane. I think Dricus is probably the strongest guy in the UFC, but Khamzat Chimaev is a guy that's going to force his style on you. I think if you are fighting Whittaker, you don't want to just do what he did against Usman and try to outstrike him there. You want to pressure a guy like Whittaker, put him on his back foot, get him to do something. Whittaker likes to control the fight in like a specific way. Like, he wants to be on the outside, kind of keep you in his range to where he's not going to get hit, and likes to evade punches that way. But he's going to throw some straight shots, sling up the head kick, and then dart in to land it straight or whatever. And that's when guys seem to catch him with the straight shots, with the jabs, with the straights. That's where we've seen Robert Whittaker get dropped. I know he got wobbled pretty badly with like a wheel kick from Paulo Costa, but Khamzat Chimaev, I won't say it's a basic style, but he's very good at just 1-2s, and maybe he'll throw a body kick or a leg kick or something like that. But I think Khamzat Chimaev is going to get in the clinch with Robert Whittaker, kind of force himself on him. And I do think Robert Whittaker does have some decent takedown defense, so I think he will defend the takedowns pretty early. But I think as this fight goes on, I think we'll see a Chimaev like start to wear on Whittaker a little bit more here. Whittaker get a little bit more tired because Chimaev is forcing the grappling on Whittaker, and Whittaker's going to make a little bit more mistakes. He's going to be a little bit slower on the feet. And I think he's going to dart in and get hit with one of the straight shots from Chimaev, and I think he's going to get dropped pretty badly. And I think we'll see Chimaev kind of pounce on Whittaker. Maybe he could get a submission from that position, or he can get a TKO. But I'm thinking a second-round TKO for Chimaev. And I guess the 5 rounds maybe will play a different aspect on the way Khamzat Chimaev fights this fight, because it is a little bit different. You got to pace yourself out, or maybe he just goes out there and does what he can to get the finish. It is Robert Whittaker. Like, you can TKO, and we've seen him get knocked out before. But I am going to go with Chimaev. I think he gets the TKO here. I think he's going to impress some people here. I think a lot of people are picking against Chimaev because of just how rough the past couple years have been. Like, he just seems so indestructible, and he's already 30 and a half years of age. Like, time kind of flew right by, because Khamzat was like, 27 when he came in and was fighting 2 divisions back-to-back weeks, all this stuff, and that's what made him a star. And then obviously we've had some issues there with the weight cuts and just a bunch of other crazy stuff. Like, he's had 2 fights in 2 years. Like, that's absolutely insane. So hopefully we can get Khamzat Chimaev back in there. This is a pretty big fight. It seems like the UFC's kind of just throwing him to the wolves, weirdly enough. No pun intended, since he's the wolf or whatever it is. But I think this is the UFC's like, here you go, 5-round fight with Whittaker, a super tough matchup, toughest matchup probably in the division for you. Here you go. Let's see what you can do. And I think Chimaev pulls it off. 2nd round TKO. If not, I can see him maybe latching up a submission when he has Whittaker hurt on the ground. But I think normally when Whittaker gets hurt, he kind of just covers up a little bit more. So I'm going to go with Chimaev here by TKO in the 2nd round. I think he lands a pretty good shot after he gets Whittaker working in the grappling a little bit more and tires him out, where Whittaker will make a pretty big mistake in there. So let's move down to the 3rd fight on the main card. We have, I guess this is where I was doing my research, Lerone Murphy versus Dan Ige. I think this is a pretty interesting fight to put on the main card. Maybe they're thinking like Dan Ige, people want to see his fight, and I guess you can market it a certain way because Dan Ige took that short notice fight, and seems like a lot of people like him. But here's the thing, I like Dan Ige, but he does well against a certain style where I think That's not Lerone Murphy. Lerone Murphy is very technical. You can get him wild like he did against Edson Barboza, where he's just hurting Barboza a lot in that fight, and he's basically hunting for the finish the entire fight. But Dan Ige, man, he's short, stocky, and can defend takedowns pretty decently well. But I think with a guy that's technical and smart like Lerone Murphy, I think he can kind of stay out of the danger of Dan Ige with those pretty big hooks that he lands. I don't think he's going to get KO'd in this fight. I just don't see it happening. Diego Lopez was kind of able to stay out of the way of it too. I guess he did land on Diego Lopez a couple of good times there. Was able to get the finish on Andre Philly, who's a little bit more wild as well. Bryce Mitchell was able to get the win over him, just taking him down, eventually getting those takedowns and controlling him and landing some shots with the threat of the takedown. I just think, and like wins against Nate Landwehr, I mean, just going through the guys that he is beating, he beats an Andre Philly, Nate Landwehr, Damon Jackson, but then loses to Mavzar, Josh Emmett, which probably a robbery. Changzhen Zhang, Gavin Tucker, he loses to Calvin Kattar, beats Edson Barboza. Like, we're going all the way down here. Like, there's a certain type of style he does beat. I think the technical boxer type style, I think he's going to do very well against Dan Ige. So I'm going to go Lerone Murphy by decision here. 29-28, maybe Dan Ige gets a decent round there, but I'm thinking 30-27, with maybe a round being a little bit closer and a judge has it a little bit differently. So I'm going Lerone Murphy. I think he just lands at will on Dan Ige here for the win. 2.5 inch reach advantage as well. I think he's just going to be a lot smarter. I don't see him getting caught by Dan Ige. I could be super wrong here. The odds are relatively close to. I'm going to go with Lerone Murphy. Let's move on. We have Magomed Ankalaev versus Alexander Rakić. You asked me a year ago after like the Jan Blachowicz fight, I'll probably say Alexander Rakić. I know he's dealing with like an ACL injury or something like that, pretty bad knee injury. I'd probably go Rakić, but I think I'm going to go with Magomed Ankalaev. I think Ankalaev's just very quick and very powerful with his hands that I don't think Rakić does have. I think Rakić is a little bit slower. Those leg kicks are pretty lethal, but from what I saw against Ankalaev against Johnny Walker, he was defending the calf kicks pretty well. It's very similar to how like Sean Strickland started doing that, where he just kept raising the knee and was throwing like teeps and stuff like that. Basically what Magomed Ankalaev was doing, and I think maybe he can take away the leg kick or at least neutralize it a little bit, the effectiveness of the leg kick of Rakić. And it is a 3-round fight, other than the 5-round fight that he had with Jan Blachowicz, where Jan Blachowicz was just tearing up his legs. I don't think Magomed Ankalaev can control Rakić on the ground here. Maybe he can kind of make it boring and push him up against the fence if Rakić is having too much success on the feet. But I think in general, in range, you'll see Rakić maybe throw something down the middle and Ankalaev kind of move out of the way and return back with a faster punch. And I just think that will be the story of this fight, just Magomed Ankalaev being faster than Rakić, being the counter striker in this fight, making it boring. Rakić can do that too, but I think Magomed Ankalaev can have the ability of, hey, I'm going to push you up against the fence and point this one out, and you're not going to be able to lay under your leg kicks, so I'm going to be able to play defense and counter strike with you. I think it's just going to be a little bit more of a point fight here, and I think Magomed Ankalaev is very good at point fighting. So I'm going to go with Ankalaev here, maybe 29-28. I think as this fight goes on, we'll see Ankalaev probably do better against defending leg kicks, but I think Rakić will probably land pretty good to the legs early on, maybe land a couple jabs and a two pretty good early on as well. But I think Magomed Ankalaev will eventually find him out, neutralize him on the feet, and then put him up against the fence, separate, play the counter-striking role, and I think he wins this one by decision. So I'm going to go Magomed Ankalaev, 29-28 decision here. I just think he's just going to be a faster guy, and I think he's going to play the counter game and maybe frustrate Rakić a little bit in there. So let's move on. We have Shara Magomedov versus Armen Petrosyan. I am going to go with Shara Magomedov. He's just very slick on the feet, very fast on the feet as well. I don't think he will take down Armen Petrosyan. I don't think that's possible here. I mean, they're both like their takedown defense is not very good. Armen Petrosyan just gave Rodolfo Vieira. I know he's very good on the ground, but Rodolfo Vieira is not doing pretty well in the UFC, and he's pretty one-dimensional in that way. But both of these guys are pretty good on the feet. Shara Magomedov, pretty good with with his kicks as well. I mean, he does a good job at keeping a good range on the feet, which I do like. He's very fast as well. I think that's just going to be a really big problem for Petrosyan, who likes to use his hands quite a bit, likes to box. I don't think he's going to be able to have too much success here. I mean, we saw what Shara Magomedov was able to do against Aleksandar. I think he fell off balance at a certain point in this fight. I could be wrong. Could be remembering it wrong. It's like 2 o'clock in the morning, but I am going to go with Shara Magomedov. I like what he did against Aleksandar, who I think is also pretty good on the feet with his hands, very similar to Armen Petrosyan. I think he can get this one done. I don't think he finishes Armen Petrosyan. I'll probably just say 30-27 decision. I think Magomedov just puts on a little bit of a masterclass, lands at will, lands at the legs, to the body, and of course to the head as well with a jab, and kind of just staying on the outside, landing a head kick, just being annoying in the sense of keeping a pretty solid range on the feet. So I'm going to go 30-27 for Shara Magomedov in this fight. Let's move down to the prelims. On the card to the prelims, we have Geoff Neal versus RDA. I'm going to have to go with Geoff Neal here. I don't think RDA can take down Geoff Neal. I think Geoff Neal's pretty good on the feet. It's basically what I'll just say here. RDA lost to post-brain. What did Luque have? It was like a hemorrhage or like some brain issue, brain bleeding. And Luque has not looked the same, except for he did beat up RDA and get the decision win there. And RDA, he's not going to be able to do what he did against Brian Barberena and kind of control him on the ground and destroy him on the ground. Geoff Neal has a really good takedown defense. You saw that in the Shavkat fight. You saw that against Bilal Muhammad earlier in his career. Defended all the takedowns. I think he did beat Bilal Muhammad, right? Yeah, defended all the takedowns pretty well. Has really good takedown defense and good power in his hands. Very good. I mean, he put up the toughest test for Shavkat Rakhmonov. I think that's saying quite a bit. I mean, he eventually got finished, and he was getting probably beat out in a couple rounds and hurt, I think, Shavkat a couple times in that fight. But I think Geoff Neal's going to beat up RDA. RDA is older, 40 years of age. I mean, he might even get the TKO here. I wouldn't mind it. Like, this isn't Gamrot who's going to take him down or anything. This is going to be a fight on the feet. I don't see 40-year-old RDA kind of imposing it as well on Geoff Neal. I think Geoff Neal is just going to hurt him pretty badly. Maybe eventually get the finish. RDA is pretty tough, but this is a 3-round fight, so I don't know. Maybe Geoff Neal, second to third round TKO, I think is what we're looking at over RDA, 40-year-old RDA. I wouldn't mind that. I wouldn't mind it going to a decision, either probably 30-27 over a guy like RDA. I just don't see takedowns happening for RDA, and I just think Geoff Neal's way better on the feet, especially at this point in their careers. So let's move on. We have Myktybek. Oh, God. Myktybek Orolbai is how I'm going to say that. Mateus Rebecki. I'm going to go Orolbai. I'm not going to lie, I completely forgot that Rebecki lost to Diego Ferreira, and that's pretty rough to see. I like what I saw from Orolbai in his last fight. Looked pretty technical on the feet, and Elvis Brenner's pretty game as well. I mean, even beat, Grom, right? Like, Elvis Brenner is a pretty solid opponent, especially at lightweight. Like, a lot of people were behind him. Like, he got that Grom win in the finish and then pretty much flatline Kainan Krzyzewski, who I don't even think is in the UFC anymore, but is on a 2-fight losing spree, a little bit rough there for him. But Orolbai looked pretty good on the feet in his last fight. Has a lot of weapons, good at keeping a range as well, and good at choosing his shot selection as well. And I think Mateus Rebecki, who just seems to wing a lot of shots, like he's a pressure fighter, wings a lot of shots. Maybe he can back up Orolbai against the fence and maybe land some crazy shots. But I just think, of course, Rebecki does have some decent wrestling. I just think eventually Orolbai is just going to be good on his feet. Maybe he can catch Rebecki and rough him up a little bit more, tire him out, and eventually get that takedown and control him on the ground. Like, I can see this happening in this fight. Maybe he gets the finish over Rebecki. I don't mind him kind of pinning him down there and elbowing him on the ground and roughing him up. But Orolbai, very quick on the feet. Eventually he'll get his takedowns going and get something for Rebecki to worry about. But Rebecki, he's just very wild on the feet, and it works against a certain opponent. But if you're not beating a guy like Diego Ferreira, it does kind of worry me a little bit more there. And I'm just going to have to go with Orolbai. I think he's pretty technical, keeps a good range, very fast. I think that'll be the difference here with Rebecki kind of just winging shots. You're going to have a very safe and technical guy in Orolbai, who I think will eventually maybe land a couple takedowns and beat up Rebecki in those positions as well. So I'm going to go Myktybek Orolbai. Myktybek? That's how I'm going to try and say that name. But I think he could get the finish. He's only 26 years of age, too. He's a lot younger than Mateus Rebecki here. And we'll have, oh my God, I forgot about the reach advantage. Holy shit. An 8-inch reach advantage at lightweight is insane. So I'm going to go with Orolbai. Maybe he might get the finish. I mean, Diego Ferreira is getting the finish. I know he has got a lot of power, but maybe Orolbai can eventually break Rebecki. I don't mind a late round TKO for Orolbai in this fight. So let's move down the card. We have Abbas Magomedov versus Brunno Ferreira. I know he's the favorite here, but I'm going to take Abbas Magomedov. A lot of people are taking Brunno Ferreira. Brunno Ferreira really scares me a little bit more here. I know Abbas Magomedov against Warlley Alves, I think he got caught off guard early on, and I think maybe got tagged a little bit, but he eventually took down Warlley Alves and was cutting him up, beating him up on the ground, and roughing him up there. But Brunno Ferreira, I had a bet on Brunno Ferreira, and I got worried that he was going to lose to Dustin Soltwiss, who I don't think is good at all. I think even Dustin Soltwiss hurt him a few times in that fight, like pretty badly as well. We've seen Brunno Ferreira against a guy like Nursultan Ruzabayev, who does have the length of Abbas Magomedov, who can teep and is very explosive and does have the wrestling ability. I don't know if Abbas Magomedov is going to put Brunno Ferreira out cold, because I know Brunno Ferreira is a stockier guy, stocky middleweight. He's going to be rough for Abbas Magomedov to potentially get a takedown here. I think if anything, it'll probably be in like the second or third round. But Brunno Ferreira, I don't know if I trust him going into this fight. And it's weird saying that against, like, when you're fighting Abbas Magomedov, the guy who gassed after one round against Sean Strickland. But we saw Abbas Magomedov push a pace. I will kind of say, like, he was grappling with Warlley Alves and went all 3 rounds with him. I'm going to go Abbas Magomedov. I like that he has a good range. I like that he's fast on the feet. I like that he can throw some teeps and kind of keep Brunno Ferreira guessing. And Brunno Ferreira might just be too wild in this fight. I think I just kind of trust the safer fighter in Magomedov here, who's going to potentially land some takedowns and throw some teeps and get to the body of Brunno Ferreira and catch him off guard that way. I don't think he's going to flatline Ferreira, which I do think there's a potential for him to hurt him very badly and beat him up on the ground. But I do think he can control this fight in certain moments, especially as this fight goes on. So I'm going to go Abbas Magomedov by decision here. I don't mind a finish either way. Actually, early on, I think Brunno Ferreira, the later this fight goes on, weirdly enough, against Abbas Magomedov, I think maybe it might shift a little bit more. I don't even know. I got too many questions for both these fighters, but I'm just going to have to stick with Abbas Magomedov just based on what I've seen from their last fights. I just can't trust someone who's getting tagged up and beat up by Dustin Soltwiss. Like, he had that really nice finish, but I just can't. I can't trust it at all. Like, at least Abbas got broken down by Sean Strickland. I know he lost to Kyle Bahayo, but Kyle Bahayo's, top 5 now? I don't know his exact rank, but, like, these aren't bad losses to have at all. So I'm going to go Abbas Magomedov here. Keep Brunno Ferreira at range, eventually take him down, beat him up on the ground, maybe get a finish. I like Abbas's chances here. If it goes to a decision, 29-28. If not, I can see Abbas Magomedov getting a finish as well. Maybe Brunno Ferreira can put him out cold. I think even Abbas got flatlined in PFL or something like that, right? By an old man. What was it? Lewis Taylor. He could just throw like a wild hook and just put Abbas out cold, but I just think Abbas keeps a decent range on the feet here. So he has a 6-inch reach advantage as well. I'm not going to take or at least make the same mistake that I did when picking Ferreira against Ruzabayev. So I'm going Abbas Magomedov here. Let's move down here. We have Kennedy Nzechukwu versus Chris Barnett. Oh my God. I shouldn't have a problem picking this fight and who to win, but Kennedy Nzechukwu, man, split decision to OSP. What is this? In 2024. Yeah, it's October. So 7 months ago. Was that March or whatever? In 2024, you're going to a split decision with OSP. I thought he was probably winning that fight, but his split decision loss to OSP does not look good in any way. You should probably be winning that fight a little bit more dominantly to a point where it shouldn't even be a split decision in the first place. Got finished by Dustin Jacoby as well. I mean, this is the same guy that got a finish over Carlos Ulberg, a very young Carlos Ulberg, and kind of put people off of Carlos Ulberg, and then eventually Ulberg got better, but his whole career seems to be hit and miss. I don't trust him. However, Chris Barnett has not fought in 2 years. I think he did have some personal issues, which I don't know too much about, but 3 of these last 4 fights have been because Chris Barnett did pull out. So first of all, we'll see if this fight even takes place. But I will say I'm just going to trust Kennedy Nzechukwu a little bit more here. I think with the range in general, 83 inches of reach against what looks to be a super big, maybe lightweight, welterweight potentially, what could be in Chris Barnett. I like Chris Barnett. He's a very fun fighter to watch, of course, but we haven't seen him in 2 years, so plus 400 is probably the right pick. I just don't see him catching Kennedy Nzechukwu, and if he does, Kennedy Nzechukwu should be cut from the UFC probably. That's what I'll say, 6'5" to 5'9". I mean, Kennedy Nzechukwu should not lose it. I mean, 35% of people are taking Chris Barnett, which I think is insane. And Chris Barnett does have a chance at winning this. Kennedy Nzechukwu's chin, I just don't trust too much. Even Dustin Jacoby, that loss has aged pretty rough as well. So I'm going to have to go Kennedy Nzechukwu. I don't think he's fallen off that far. I like Chris Barnett. I'm not shitting on Chris Barnett too badly, but if Chris Barnett wins this, I think Kennedy Nzechukwu should be fearing for his life, for his job, I will say, because this is a pretty rough losing streak he's on. Finished by Dustin Jacoby, who I like, but Dustin Jacoby's not looking great these days. OSP split decision loss in 2024. What are we doing? But yeah, I'm going Kennedy Nzechukwu probably by decision, kind of just staying in range, kind of just tagging up Chris Barnett. I don't think Chris Barnett's going to land like a spinning back kick or anything like that and flatline Kennedy Nzechukwu or land anything with his hands and put Kennedy Nzechukwu out cold or drop him and finish him up on the ground or get a rear naked choke or anything like that. Chris Barnett has been out of the UFC, not out of the UFC, but hasn't been fighting for 2 years, 38 years of age against a 32-year-old guy that has, 8 inches of reach on him, 6'5" to 5'9". I don't see Chris Barnett winning this one. I'm going to go Kennedy Nzechukwu. I don't think he finishes Chris Barnett because Chris Barnett is decently tough. Maybe he can go to the body or anything, but I just think Nzechukwu is just going to be a little bit too technical in this fight and just pick apart Chris Barnett in this one. So let's move down. We have Farid Basharat versus Victor Hugo. I'm going to go with Farid Basharat. Victor Hugo in this fight against Pedro Falcao. I don't know how to say that. Falcao, he seemed pretty one-dimensional in that fight, and you can't say the same against for Farid Basharat. Looked really good against Taylor Lapilus, was able to take him down. I think Taylor Lapilus has pretty solid takedown defense, and is pretty technical on the feet as well. So he was able to beat Taylor Lapilus by decision there. Was also able to get a decision against Damon Blackshear, who's very tough on the ground. We've seen, of course, I know this, it's kind of aged up and down for Damon Blackshear there, but Victor Hugo was able to do well on the feet because he's able to defend the takedowns against Pedro Falcao, and Falcao wasn't able to do well on the feet there. And I just think Farid Basharat is just a lot better than Pedro. Probably will be able to keep some nice control on the ground against Victor Hugo, and will be able to out-technique him on the feet as well. So I'm going to go Farid Basharat by decision. I don't think he gets the finish. Basharat brothers aren't really known for too many finishes. I guess he got a finish over Cledson Rodriguez, which doesn't really mean too much, but he's a very good fighter, very technical. I think he's just a little too technical, a little too much more skilled than a Victor Hugo in this fight. 27 years of age as well. He's going to continue to get better, same reach advantage as well. Let's move on. 12-0. I think he gets 13-0 in this one. Let's move down. We have Rinat Fakhretdinov versus Carlos Leal. Very interesting fight here because Rinat Fakhretdinov looked pretty indestructible. I know he went to the draw with Aleksandar Zaleski, which was kind of a shocker, but kind of not. Aleksandar Zaleski does really well against grapplers who don't have that great a stand-up, and then you see his fight against Nicholas Dalby, and you're like, ooh, 2 fights in a row, that's a little bit rough. Nicholas Dalby, his takedown defense has gotten a lot better too. I mean, it's pretty immediate, gets right up as well. And we did see Rinat Fakhretdinov, his hands did look a little bit better as well. Looked fast on the feet, has some good power. I think even dropped Nicholas Dalby, and his pace never went down either. Like, his cardio wasn't necessarily a problem. But Carlos Leal, very big guy here. His takedown defense, I will say, like, his instincts is a little bit slower than a Nicholas Dalby from what I saw. But again, he's a lot bigger of a guy. He's very technical as well, which I really like to see. We'll see if Rinat Fakhri... I think this is kind of a tougher test for a debut opponent for Rinat. He's 33 years of age, too. I wonder... I don't know. He's a little bit older, but he'll have a 2-inch reach advantage here. This is going to be really tough, in my opinion. I think Carlos is being a thicker, stockier guy who's very technical, kind of picks and chooses his shots. It's going to be a little bit more tough for Rinat in this fight, so I'm going to be a little bit wary here, but I think Rinat does get this one done, probably by decision. I don't think he finishes Carlos Leo. Maybe he can kind of tire him out as this fight goes on, push a pace on him, and kind of play defense, get him thinking about the takedowns, and kind of slow Lil's offense down, which I can see happening. But I just do worry a little bit of what Lil can do on the feet with just his patience and kind of picking his shots. But we'll see what happens here. I am going to go Rinat Fakhretdinov. I think he is still pretty skilled, even though the last couple of fights have been a little bit rough for him. I do think he gets this one done. So, and Carlos Lil has, I believe, fought some UFC level opponents. I believe Sadabu Sai against in the PFL playoffs. Sean Strickland touts him a bunch of times as well. He's a pretty good fighter. 17, 8-2. I mean, I guess he's come off a couple rough losses there, but has also gotten some really nice finishes as well. Sadabu Sai beat David Zuwada, who I believe was a former UFC fighter. Chris Brown, too, former singer. I think Rinat just gets this one done. Higher level opponents he's fought. It's going to be tough, but I think he gets this one done by decision. 30-27, maybe 29-28. Maybe Carlos Lil lands some good shots and tags him up a little bit, but I'm going to trust Rinat in this one. Let's move on. We have Ibo Aslan versus Rafael Cerqueira, is how I'm going to say that. I'm going to go with Ibo Aslan. Pretty solid prospect, in my opinion. The thing with Rafael Cerqueira is not necessarily him being worse than Ibo Aslan. Like, he's 11-0 prospect, 34 years of age, so he's a little bit older. Looks how he looks in his picture. Like, he's a pretty big dude, pretty big Brazilian guy. But Ibo Aslan, I think, is a little bit more opportunistic in his fighting style. I think if Cerqueira throws like a kick or something, I can see Ibo Aslan like grabbing the kick and landing on him in return. Like, you kind of saw that a little bit against Anton Turkalj, who did beat him. I believe, was it Brave? I could be wrong here. Yeah, Brave. He ended up beating Ibo Aslan. It was the only loss on his record. Got the fight in the rematch, and he was getting hit in a couple moments in that fight, but I trust Ibo to eventually, evolve as a fighter. 77.5 inches of reach as well. I think he's on the sauce, probably. I think both of these guys are probably on the sauce. I'm going to be real. But heavyweight from Brazil. I actually didn't... Hold on. I actually didn't check this. What weight was he making in his... Am I crazy? It's not on here. I don't know. I could be... Maybe he just lost a weight like Cannon or something. But Ibo Aslan, I think he's really opportunistic on the feet. I think he can find his shots on a slower guy in Cerqueira, in my opinion. Gonna find ways to hit him. Maybe go to the leg, go to the body a little bit more here. I think eventually beat him down. I can see a TKO victory for Ibo Aslan here in the second or third round is what I like. I can see him, again, catching a teep from Cerqueira, which he does like to do quite a bit. Again, just be a little bit more active, land a little bit more to the body, and eventually break this guy down. So I'm going to go Ibo Aslan by finish in the second or third round. Let's move on. We have Brunno Silva versus Ismail Nordiev to open this card. This is a tougher one because Brunno Silva has been on a rough losing streak, I will say, and some of the fights are pretty questionable. He was on a pretty good run until the Alex Pereira fight. Like, he made that fight pretty competitive. I was like, wow, this guy can actually be something. Like, he was tagging up Pereira. He made it very close with Pereira on Pereira's rise, which was pretty impressive. And then he goes out against GM3 and then just gets completely choked out. And I'm like, what the fuck's going on here? And then you have Brad Tavares. He finishes Brad Tavares and then loses to Brendan Allen. I think he gets knocked down and submitted. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe he gets taken down and submitted. Had a decent performance against Shara Magomedov and then gets eye poked to death by Chris Weidman. So, I mean, just a very rough losing streak here. I do think he gets it done against Ismail Nordiev. Ismail Nordiev does have some nice finishes on his record, but as you can see, like, he's also lost quite a bit as well. I mean, he's lost to Sean Brady on the regional scene, which isn't a bad loss to have at all. But I mean, you look at his fight against Tahar, Hedby, guillotine round 1, and then you see a knockout in round 1, armbar in round 1. It just seems like he's a little bit more of a hit or miss fighter. I trust Bruno Silva in his experience. I know he's 35 years of age, and this guy's 28. He's getting a little bit older, but at the end of the day, this is middleweight. We're looking at like a potential former gatekeeper for Bruno Silva. This is really the end for him. Former gatekeeper. I mean, he still beat Brad Tavares, who was the ultimate gatekeeper. I won't say the ultimate gatekeeper, but he was a gatekeeper a while back. So I think he still has it a little bit in him. Maybe he's just on a really bad momentum shift here and losing to Chris Weidman by eye pokes, but I'm just going to trust Bruno Silva. Has more experience against higher level opponents, beaten higher level opponents, made it tough with guys like Alex Pereira. Even GM3 is a legend in his own right, so probably shouldn't lose to GM3, let's be real. But I think he does eventually land on Nordiev, maybe he can get the finish, but Bruno Silva might just be one of these guys where I might not be able to pinpoint what the fuck's going on with him. So I am going to go with Bruno Silva here. I trust in his experience, but I can see him getting finished by Ismail Nurdiev. I mean, this fight is just a complete toss-up in my opinion. I'm just going to trust in Bruno Silva. I mean, he's going to get an early finish. That's kind of the trend of Ismail Nurdiev. He's aggressive in certain points, but he can also be caught on the feet, and I just think Silva's a little bit higher level than the guy he's been fighting. So I'm going to go Bruno Silva by finish in the first round. I can also see this one going to decision. I don't mind it either way, but I just know Bruno Silva has a lot of power in his hands. So I think he has the chance to eventually get the finish over Nordiev. So this is my picks for UFC 308. I kind of changed it up a little bit more here, so I'm not even sure if anybody knows who the hell I'm picking on these prelim fights. But I hope you guys enjoyed the video. Let me know who you guys have down below for the main event, co-main event, and what do you think about this card. And I'll see you guys next time.